Welcome back to the channel. We are doing a squishy makeover today. We'll get back to doing dolls after this, but I needed a little break to get my inspiration going again. This is what I do when I'm not filming. Lots of beautiful flowers. They're so much fun to make, and so I make on my own time. They don't smell like anything. I'm excited to show you this new makeover. Let's get into it. All right, this is our first victim. Let's de-tag him. Now we're just gonna scruff him up a little bit. I'm gonna use that spray-on fabric paint because the white is so precious and so hard to get a hold of for some reason. Obviously, he's one of those dollar store pink unicorns. Not too terribly offensive to look at, but these eyes are just really weird, so we're gonna fix that. First things first, we've got to spray him, get him completely white. This stuff is great to use, except for it will stick to any surface and take all of the guts with it. See how it fell over because of the wind and it ripped a big old chunk out of his face? So we will use the puffy paint method to try and fill this in. I know that puffy paint sinks. Ugh, got a booger in here. Got it. Yeah, you can see the bottom got ripped off really bad too. This is totally stuck, so I'm just gonna have to cut the top off to let it flow. There we go. Those are my good scissors. Shouldn't have used them for that. That's all right. So I'm just gonna fill these in and hope that they sink down. Even though this is fabric paint, it will get hard if there's too much of it. Now that the puffy paint is dry, I drew some eyes in the shape of the nose that I wanna do. Then I mixed up some fleshy, kind of dusty pink, I think is probably what this color is called. If you haven't figured out from the outline, I wanna do a little piglet instead of that creepy looking unicorn. I do realize this is pink just like the original was, but I feel like this is a better pink and it reads more piglet than magical unicorn. I wonder what you would call this type of style that I like to do my little animals in. They're kind of surrealistic, but still a little bit cartoony, cute. What is the name for that? So using Poscas on squishies is probably a big no-no. It doesn't make it crispy and crunchy like using actual acrylic paint would do on a squishy, but it does get cracked. It like dries out and makes little tiny cracks and it's a little bit flaky instead of crispy. But I'm just gonna put this down as like a base layer for the paint. Since fabric paint is so transparent, it is a little bit dangerous using Poscas because they're so flippin' watery though. They do have a tendency to splash or drip or explode, and with black especially on this light pink background, it's a little bit scary. But I'm just gonna use this to kind of outline where I'm going to put the actual black fabric paint on these eyes. And that way I can keep the black paint inside of this line. Next up to be painted is this cute little nose. I'm gonna make it a little bit lighter and brighter than the background pink. I like how they are gonna complement each other. It looks really cute together, I think. I've noticed on my less cartoony squishies, on the more somewhat realistic looking ones, I don't add mouths. I guess that's kind of because on real animals, they're just implied. Like, I guess you would realize that the mouth is kind of at the bottom of this nose, and so I don't have to paint it on here. Whereas like the cartoon ones, you want to do like an expression, so you do like a cute little W mouth or something. But for these, they're just cuter without. Let's add a little bit of this light pink to the inner ear too. Maybe not as pink, maybe whiter, but just on one side because I have a design idea. Now that our little pink snoot is dry, we can add the little nostrils. Ignore all the texture you see on top here and the old nostrils. That puffy paint didn't fill it in quite as nicely as I like, but from afar it looks perfect.
That's right, cute.
Now it's time to address the piggies, or toes, if you will. These hooves are cloven, which means split, as I learned from the Unicorn is Pretty Great book. It's a pretty great book. So I am going over this with Posca, but I will go on top with some fabric paint. Please pay no mind to the hideous underpiece. Oh God, don't look at it. It did get completely sheared off, and I don't want to use a bunch of puffy paint to seal it since no one's gonna see it. I'm not gonna see it. And you see how well that puffy paint worked for me. There's still a big crunchy hole right here on this hoof that is impossible to color in, even with this wet Posca. It's got all these little tiny crevasses. So let's just pretend like that bottom part does not exist. And I'm also gonna leave the in-between parts of these hooves white. Controversial? Probably. Decided to mix up the fabric paint a little bit darker than the gray Posca. I don't really have a darker gray Posca, but I thought that it would be a better balance with the black eyes to have some dark hooves on this little piglet. And now that all the obvious design choices are being completed, I am moving into the scary territory of the actual pig design that I was thinking of. So let me finish up this paw and I'll show you what I'm talking about. Oh, hold on, there's one more way I can procrastinate. Eye shinies. I'm not doing big ones, just little tiny blips. Okay, now the scary part. As an added precaution, I'm going to outline this with a pen type marker because I want to make sure the lines are thin enough before I start painting this on. I don't even know if I'm going to do a Posca first. I think I can just start painting in here. I probably will. We got spots all over. I'm doing a pink and black spotted pig,
because I'm hoping the spots will make him look even cuter.
In order to make these spots look organic, I tried to put them kind of close together in the front, and then I also had this black ring that is around the eye, and unfortunately I also wanted to do a black ear, and I didn't want to do the one on the other side. I wanted to do this side, and so I put it there anyway, and I think it actually looks better that they're on the same side. The last spot's going to be that big one right on the back, and I'm going to use this Posca to clean up all the lines. So while we're filling up this back spot, let's talk about what I want to do with the hair and the horn. Obviously, I don't want it to be a horn anymore because this is a piglet now and not a unicorn. So it is a perfect shape to make it a birthday hat. It's both my kids' birthdays this month. And for the hair, I'm going to keep it white, and I'm just going to put a little gray to give it a little depth and dimension and use the white Posca to clean up the edges. So here is our original squishy. $1.25. Looks like he had a tail that I didn't notice until right now. We are going to forget that I even noticed that because here he is, our new piggy squishy.
It really doesn't even look like the same squishy.
My guy is real cute. If you have a name idea for him, please put it down in the comments. Now it's time to make him a little friend. So this is our friend Waffle Cat. His design is cute if not well executed. Let's get him scruffed up for paint. Okay, but before paint, I'm going to trim some of these seams. I don't really do this much anymore because I always trim too much of the seam and get into gouging, but he's got a lot of sticking out pieces. Also, that mouth is really crooked. Let's just spray over it. There it is. Now go ahead and get stuck to that box so I can rip a chunk out of you too. Yep, the wind blew this one onto her face, so her face just got ripped off, and her little foot here. So we'll just fill that in with puffy paint, maybe try to smooth it a bit. Hope it turns out okay. You can see a big chunk of texture that we weren't looking for right there on the beak. Yes, this is now a beak. I usually like to hide what my design is going to be until it becomes a little more obvious, but I really wanted to draw out what it was going to be before I started painting for both of these. So you can tell this one kind of has some big eyes and a beak. It is not an owl. It's going to be like a griffin character. And I know this brown isn't probably the most fun color to see painted in a squishy makeover video, but it's really just a base for all the other stuff I'm going to do after I once again procrastinate by doing the eyes because I'm nervous about
My overall design.
I must say I am glad that I took a little break from dolls for this week to do some squishies because I forgot how fun they can be to decorate, even if you're nervous that they're not going to come out the way that you imagine them. So now I have my black and white fabric paint barely mixed so that I have some dark and light grays. I didn't want it to be a solid color because I want it to look like fluffy feathers all inside here and around the face. Sometimes it feels a little illegal to try to represent texture with your brush stroke on a 3D surface as you would on a 2D surface. I'm still kind of learning what translates and what looks just like a sloppy mess. This bottom part is going to give me a lot of trouble because of all of this texture where the foot got ripped off. So I'm trying to make some claws down here at the bottom, like big talons. But before we can make those work, I am going to address the feathers on the back here. So I just have this big old paintbrush that I am using to make these feather stripes on here. It's a pattern that I saw on like an owl. I used owls for my inspiration on this guy. Even though he's not an owl, he is a griffin. And griffins don't normally have ears, but for some reason, I don't know if it's that Mandela effect where we just remember something one way even though it's never been that way. I always think of griffins as having ears, and owls don't have ears either, but there is the horned owl who has these big feather tufts that look just like ears. So I wanted to bring some of the brown into the face. The owls have these kind of like recessed eyes right here, but the brown just looked a little bit off, just very kind of cartoony compared to all of the implied texture and color. It was just too thick and flat and non-dimensional. So I decided to cover that up with a little bit of gray, maybe try to blend it a bit, but obviously the Posca had dried as I put this fabric paint on it. So we just leaned in even more and brought the feathers onto the eyes, the feathers onto the beak, and I tried to blend a little bit more of the white and gray to make like the feather effect. I think it looks better. I don't think I want so much of the eyes covered with feathers, so I'm just going to fill this back in with black and outline these beak holes, and then we can move on to these crazy talons. It was really hard to make straight lines on these curved paws. I'm hoping that this is coming through. I thought about putting something under there, like maybe the claws are grasping a piece of wood or something, but I thought that could be very confusing. So I just left them like this, and this side was the easier side because the right hand side has this big chunk missing. So trying to make a pointy claw that goes right into this crevasse was not happening. Let's leave that train wreck behind us for a minute and put a little light in these eyes. I had an idea to make like a water line in the bottom of these little owl eyes, but my pens are not small enough, and I thought I might be able to achieve that by just connecting these dots. Instead, it looks like a nice little shine. It looks cute even though it wasn't what I was trying to do. These feathers on the back did not look as crisp and clean as I hoped they would, and I knew I was going to put feathers inside these ears, and so I came back through and touched up all of these feather lines with the white Posca, and I think it actually makes it look better. Makes it look more intentional and clean and more like stripes instead of, I don't know what it looked like before. I also felt like every part where two different colors meet should have some white tufts. The end of the griffin's tail has tufts. Any place where feathers would be sticking out, this is the horned owl pieces that have tufts. Any place where the white needs to blend into the gray. I could have stayed with neutral colors for this beak, but I thought with all of the gray and the black and the white, we needed a pop of color. So instead of like a beige or a yellow, I did a bright orange, and I think it looks really cute on this griffin. So now that this beak is nice and orange, I'm gonna go back through, clean up these talons, add some darker feathers, do some better blending with the tufts around the claws, do some blending with some tufts on the nose. I wanted to make sure that we had a separate side over here. It got a little crazy on our left side, but we need some of this Posca blending power. And I think that is it for our cute little baby griffin bird. Let's go back and remember what this squishy looked like before. It was a delicious little waffle squishy with some syrup on top and around the neck for some reason, and no waffle pattern on the tail. This is the second time I've noticed the tail on the original squishy, but this is what it looks like now. It's weird to me how different the shapes of the squishies look once you change just the eye shapes and nose shapes. I feel like my redone squishies look cuter and more compact. I know I used to name these squishies, and I do love naming them, and I actually have a name in mind for this one, but it is a secret, and you'll have to ask me what it is because I honestly don't remember any of my squishies' names after I name them because they don't come back. Maybe I should bring some of them back. Maybe we should make some friends for some of my old squishies. I don't know. If you ask me in the comments, I will tell you what the squishy's name is. I did not pick one out for the little piglet, though. That guy is open for naming. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.